So this week I'm talking about 3 ways to recognize your boundaries in relationship, because boundaries are what make our relationships stay healthy, and they also preserve your time and energy. So it's super important to make sure that you know what your boundaries are. But first, my name's Michelle Ferris. I'm a psychotherapist and I love helping people create relationships that work. So what are boundaries? They're basically limits you set for yourself that determine what you're going to participate in and when you're going to remove yourself. They're really about protecting yourself from harm. They're not about getting other people to change their behavior, because that part we're totally powerless over. And for a boundary to be healthy and effective, it has to be something you can control yourself. So if the boundary is about the choices you make, then you can absolutely control what your boundaries are in relationship. So for instance, if someone is behaving in a way that you don't like, you remove yourself. You don't expect them to stop. You can certainly ask them to stop, but you can't control ultimately whether or not they're going to do that. So here are 3 ways to recognize your boundary in relationships. So the first is, I want you to look at your reactions, both physical and emotional. And physical reactions are important to start with because they're super easy. When something difficult or uncomfortable happens, your body is going to react. Whether you're going to get a stomach ache, a headache, you might have some chest tightening, you might have some muscle tension in your shoulders, or your throat might feel like it's closing. All of those are really important signs because it tells you that something isn't okay with you, and that's how you find your boundary. Another example might be if someone hurts your feelings and you feel really sad, that's important information because that tells you what isn't okay for you. Because when your feelings are hurt, that gives you really valuable information about what kind of behavior or treatment you want in your relationships. And if it's a repetitive theme that you're always feeling disrespected or dishonored in your relationship, that feeling is going to be really important because it signals to you something needs to change, which are basically what boundaries help us the most with. Now be sure to stay until the end where I give you a bonus tip on what you need to do before you ever set a boundary. So the next thing you need to do is you need to look at your relationships. What you'll want to look at is the quality of relationships you have and your own relationship behavior. Because when we're looking at our relationships, we want to look at where are those instances where you're reacting a lot? Where are those instances where you feel disrespected or dishonored? So for instance, in relationships, do you tend to overfunction? Do you tend to do everything for the other person and get nothing back? And that leads to a lot of hurt and resentment. But if you can start to identify some of those dysfunctional relationship patterns, that's going to help you identify where your boundaries are. So if you're overfunctioning, you may realize, wow, you know what? That isn't working for me right now, and I need to give less to that person and see if they're willing to give me more of a 50-50 relationship, because that is a lot healthier than doing all the work yourself. Another pattern might be, do you attract people who are really needy or have a lot of problems and need fixing? That can lead to burnout really fast. But that's also a really important relationship pattern where you may have to question yourself and say, do I really want that? Because attracting people with a lot of problems tends to lead to a lot of codependent rescuing behavior. And that may be where your boundary is you may realize, you know what, I don't want to attract people who need me anymore. It's too exhausting. So when you look at your own relationship patterns and your own relationship behavior, that's going to help you identify and recognize where your boundaries are in relationship. Now, the last one is I want you to look at your values. These are principles that you live by that are super important. Things like honesty, integrity, what kind of person you want to hang out with, what kind of person you want to be in relationship with. For instance, for me, I don't really want to hang out with people who drink a lot. That's not my value. I'm not into that scene. I'm not into going to bars. That's just not me. So if I meet somebody that tends to do a lot of bar hopping and want to drink a lot socially, I'm probably not going to be that close to them because that's my boundary. I'm not going to expect them not to drink, but I'm not going to necessarily want to hang out with them because that's not a value we share. Another value you could think about is honesty. Do you have people in your life that aren't honest and you don't really respect, but you're still in the relationship or the friendship because you feel obligated to be there? That's really important, because if you're picking people who aren't aligned with most of your really important values, it's going to cause tension and it's going to make you feel more alone in those relationships. I know for me it did, because when I hung out with people who didn't reflect my values of personal growth, I really felt like those relationships were empty. And now, fast forward 30 years, most of my close friends all do personal growth work because we all have that in common. That doesn't make me right or superior. It just means that's the value I want to live by. And I'm not really interested in having a friendship where you talk about surface stuff all the time and you don't really get to know each other on a deeper level, because that's who I am. So when it comes to values, I want you to think about, what are those things that are really important to you? Do you want to hang out with positive people? Do you want to hang out with people who have integrity and their words match their actions? All of those things are really important to consider because they vary so much from person to person. So it's important to know what those are, because your values are going to show you where your boundaries are. Because like me, I know who I want to hang out with and who I don't want to hang out with based on what's important to me. Now, the bonus tip here is, before you ever set a boundary, you have to give yourself permission to have one. And what I mean by that is, a lot of times people get stuck because they feel guilty. You might feel like, oh, I shouldn't want someone to be a certain way, or I shouldn't want a relationship that's healthier or more respectful. Well, you know what? You want what you want, and you have every right to have that. So part of what I want you to do is, I want you to give yourself permission to have what you want, because you're not going to be able to set a boundary unless you give yourself permission to do that. Now, the next thing I want you to do is go watch my video on being afraid to set boundaries, because that's going to be your next step. Thanks so much.